All right, so you can start anytime.
Yep, it's going.
Okay, super. All right, so on page 120, you looked at that quote, her voice is full of money. That was it. I never understood it before. It was full of money. That was the inexhaustible charm that rose and fell in it, the jingle of it, the cymbal song of it. High in a white palace, the king's daughter, the golden girl. So your question was, what does Gatsby mean when he says her voice is full of money? So, Harry, we're going to go and look at your response. All right, will you share with us what you said?
I think it means that how, like, Daisy has always been, like, he's starting to realize that Daisy just wants, like, the money and the idea of being with someone with money and class.
Yeah, and I like how you said money and class. Because for her, it is those two things. It has to be the money and the status. Now, let's look at something previously that now we'll understand more. Hold your place here and flip back to page 96, the last page of chapter 5. So this is at the end of the chapter when Gatsby and Daisy are finally reunited, and we looked at this previously. We talked about how that Gatsby felt a sense of disillusionment, a little like Daisy hadn't, she tumbled short of his dreams. But we looked at how, you see the paragraph that starts with, as I watched him? Look at the end of that. See the sentence that says, I think that? Let's make sure we mark this. I'm pretty sure we did when we looked at it before. I think that voice held him most, with its fluctuating, feverish warmth, because it couldn't be overdreamed. That voice was a deathless song. Now, if we put that together now with Gatsby on page 110 or 120 saying, her voice is full of money. So now let's think about that. What is it that's actually holding him most?
Her voice.
And what is her voice full of?
Money.
Money. So are we seeing that connection there?
You look at the feel of her, and her voice is the money. You like seeing the purity and the money, and her voice, it just is the money.
Yeah, exactly. So remember how we had that discussion of whether or not Gatsby actually loves Daisy? We get more reinforcement here that it is what she represents that he loves and not the person herself. Because it's her voice full of money that holds him and not her herself. Does that make sense? All right, fantastic. Okay, so now let's get to your yikes. Okay, so Haley, what page was your yikes on?
Mine was kind of on, was on 128.
Okay, 128.
And I was kind of confused about that part, but whenever he was talking about Oxford and said he'd only been there for like 5 months, I was like, so did he lie? Like, why did he not, say that?
And you know the answer to that. Because when he previously said that he was an Oxford man, he's trying to establish this identity. He no longer feels that he needs that identity here in this part. Why is he willing to say, yeah, I just went here for 5 months, I'm not really an Oxford man? Why can he say that here?
Because he already has Daisy, so he doesn't need to create that image anymore.
Exactly. Did you hear that, Haley? Is that what you're going to say?
Mm-hmm.
I knew that's exactly what you were going to say. So he doesn't need that pretense anymore because he has Daisy. So he doesn't feel like he needs to maintain that facade any longer about being an Oxford man. Olivia Grace.
Also, I think that Gatsby only being in Oxford for 5 months really tells us how when he and Nick were in the car, when he told him he went to Oxford, he was like trying to find some proof immediately, like a picture.
Yeah.
I think a medal for something.
Yes, and remember we looked at that part, and Nick didn't believe any of that until Gatsby showed him the picture. That was his proof, because so he was really skilled at maintaining that facade. But we're seeing now he doesn't feel like he needs it as much. Excellent. All right, let's hear another yikes. Let's hear from Olivia Whetstone.
Mine was from 130.
130.
When
Yes.
Gatsby just
drops the bomb where it's just like, your wife doesn't love you, she never loved you, she loves me.
Yeah,
Like,
ooh,
dang.
yeah, in our book I wrote, wow, beside that, exactly. Because it's, yeah, he's through playing around. He's ready for this to just to come to a head and say, okay, here we are. And I'm sure you noticed and marked all through these references to heat.
Mm-hmm.
They're everywhere, because this is hot. This discussion, it makes me feel awkward. It makes me feel uncomfortable to read this, because I'm just like, ugh, this is so intense. So yeah, very, he's trying to bring everything to a head here, and he certainly does. While we're on this page, remember how I told you previously, I really want to punch Tom in the face so many times? Boy, this is one of these times. Boy, this is one of these times. So let's look at the top where it says self-control. So when you look at that paragraph, what does he say that you think I would want to punch him in the face for? And I'm really a non-violent person, but he gets me.
That last phrase.
Yeah, that's part of it, for sure. Yeah, the racism in that paragraph, the Mr. Nobody from nowhere, and people begin by sneering at family life and family institutions. Oh, the hypocrisy of his statement. I mean, he's been sneering at family institutions since about 3 months after they got married. So, yeah, everything here, the arrogance, the racism, the hypocrisy, you should write that in your, like, arrogant, racist, hypocritical.
Could you argue that like Tom sees Gatsby as like so impure that it's almost like the fact that he's with Daisy is like intermarriage between the black and the white?
Yeah, actually that ties in with what I was going to say next about there is a theory among literary critics, which you could make a case for this. To me, it's not. I'm not sure Fitzgerald was actually going for that. I mean, who knows? He may have been. But there are some literary critics who see what Jordan says there, we're all white here, who make the argument that Fitzgerald is hinting that Gatsby is not completely white. Similar, you remember that Desiree's baby story we read where there was that mixed blood? That some literary critics think that maybe Fitzgerald is hinting that about Gatsby here. I don't think we need to get all caught up in that, but it's an interesting theory to think about. Okay? All right. Let's hear one more yikes. Isaac, what page is yours on? Okay, where everything is coming out. And before we leave this page, let's look over at 131 down at the bottom. The paragraph that says she does though. Again, oh, Tom, ugh. When he says once in a while, do you see that part? Once in a while, I go off in a spree and make a fool of myself, but I always come back, and in my heart, I love her all the time. Really? Really, Tom? Yeah, and I love how Daisy says, you're revolting, because that's exactly what I'm thinking about. Okay? All right, so let's do this feels important. So this time, let's see, middle row, I want you to talk to the person who's behind you. And then front row, I'm going to let you for right now just talk to your same person who's beside you. Okay? All right. Sherry, this feels important.
We're talking about the we just said freshly launched, and I don't know why, but it seems like the thing has never come up until now. And there's another part that I just right now. said that she doesn't look like her dad, it's her mom. I was like wondering if it was Gatsby's kid, which would be like pretty crazy.
Yeah, so much money.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a look at what we think is important. All right, Ashlyn, what page should we go to?
It's not really a page, but I said the nonstop mention of heat, but we already talked about that, but as I'm thinking about it, I don't know the page number, but it just came up as me and him were talking about it. It was when Daisy turned her daughter around and said, or like, how do you like him, and like showing her Gatsby.
Oh, okay, let's go and look at that part with the daughter. Y'all help me find this page.
117.
Yes, it is.
Excellent. All right, so let's go 117. All right, so first of all, what color is so very definitely associated with this little girl?
Yellow.
Yellow and
White.
Yeah, white. Okay. So we've got I'm looking at the paragraph right in the middle of the page that says that's because your mother wanted to show you off. Her face bent into the single wrinkle of the small white neck. Jordan's got on a white dress too, and then late at the bottom, Daisy says she doesn't look like her father, she looks like me. She's got my hair and my shape of the face. So we can see how this Daisy is, again, parading her child, not this sense of like real strong love and connection, but like, you know, her beautiful little fool of her daughter. So we see how she's associated with white just like Daisy, that she is going to, we see her as, you know, probably following in those same footsteps. Okay? All right. Let's see what else we think is important. Thomas, what page should we go to?
I just said it was 115, and it was just how they can, was it conductor, the stripper show.
Mm-hmm.
And then it says on part that Daisy's voice was cold.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a part where it says her voice is cold?
It was when, it was page 132.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was after Tom said all that stuff about like, even when they were walking down the house.
Oh yeah, I see that. Please don't, her voice was cold. Yes, excellent. All right, so we've got things are heating up and she's cooling off. Excellent, very good, Thomas. All right, Sailor, what page should we go to?
For this feels important.
Yep.
I forgot, well, actually for both that and yikes, I forgot to put the page number.
All right, what's
But
happening?
it was towards the beginning of the chapter, whenever the daughter comes into the scene.
Mm-hmm.
It's like just as a freshly laundered nurse leading a little girl came into the room, and since like the daughter really hadn't come into play much,
Mm-hmm.
and now she's like coming in, that kind of felt important.
Yeah, and it's like she is, and if we look at that part where Gatsby says, see the paragraph that says, Gatsby and I in turn leaned down and took the small reluctant hand. Afterward, he kept looking at the child with surprise. I don't think he had ever really believed in its existence before. Why would Gatsby want to kind of mentally deny the existence of this child?
Because Tom.
Yeah, that's like a really big thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's like manifestation of their relationship. Excellent. All right, let's hear another. This is important. Shelby, what page should we go to?
I don't know, but it was when Daisy picks Tom again over
Ooh, yes. Let's go look at that part. All right, so Daisy picks Tom again. So this is going to be at the end of the section. 134, 135. There's so much that's happening here. Let's look at why she ends up once again choosing Tom over Gatsby. Let's back up to 133. So we knew that Tom was gonna make an effort to find out what was going on with Gatsby. And we learn here what Tom found out, and we get a lot of background information on Gatsby. So at the very bottom, I found out what your drugstores were. He and this Wolfsheim bought a lot of side street drugstores here in Chicago, sold grain alcohol over the counter. And that confirmed, we already knew that, didn't we? I mean, it was like, yeah, okay, so we already pretty much had that figured out, that he was a bootlegger. But then on 134, apparently it's worse. You see the paragraph that says, "Don't you call me old sport?" Gatsby said, "Nothing. Walter could have you up on the betting laws too, but Wolfsheim scared him into shutting his mouth." When y'all read that part, did you think about those cufflinks?
Mm-hmm.
Those teeth on the cufflinks? Ooh, yep. And then look at the next paragraph. "The drugstore business was just small change," continued Tom slowly, "but you've got something on now that Walter's afraid to tell me about." And then in that next paragraph, about halfway through, do you see the sentence that says, "He looked," and this is said in all contempt for the babbled slander of his garden, as if he had killed a man. What inferences did you make about Gatsby after you read that part?
He actually killed a man.
And how would that connect with Wolfsheim? Because we know Wolfsheim, he's close in with Wolfsheim.
Yeah, Wolfsheim's kind of like a bad guy. I don't know. I feel like he would be more the one to get his hands dirty with that kind of stuff.
Oh, like do the
Like the
actual
teeth,
killing?
yeah.
Because remember how when we talked last time, we said, okay, it sounds like Wolfsheim's probably in the mafia.
Yeah.
So this makes me strongly wonder, is Gatsby in the mafia too? So it's like it's worse than bootlegging. Yes, Olivia?
So, if Gatsby now has all of this money, I just wonder, why does he stay in the business?
Do y'all have any theories on that? Like you say, okay, I'm done with this, I'm gonna walk away now?
Can you really leave?
Yeah.
I feel like when you join one of those kind of things, you don't really have like, it's kind of like with like, I hate to bring it up, but like gang stuff, normally you can never leave that.
Yeah, that would be my theory too, that I wonder if he could leave, you know? Like if he's in, he's in.
Yeah, I just think about, because he wants Daisy, even if he doesn't actually love her, even if he just wants the idea of her, he's
Yeah.
convinced that
Yeah,
he
because
loves
he
her.
thinks he loves her, for sure.
Yeah, he does,
Yeah.
but if he loves her that much, obviously Daisy isn't gonna be supportive of his evil activities.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly what we see at the bottom of that page. You see the paragraph that says, "It passed," and this is what Shelby was, you were saying this, that Daisy chooses Tom here. And this is the point where that happens. You see the paragraph that says, "It passed." See the sentence that says, "but with every word"? If you didn't mark that, you need to make sure you do. "But with every word she was drawing further and further into herself, so that he gave up, and only the dead dream." I circled that. I underlined the whole thing and then circled that. Dead dream fought on as the afternoon slipped away, trying to touch what was no longer tangible, struggling unhappily, undespairingly toward that lost voice across the room.
I was confused on 135 about how it says like I feel like Tom would say like, "No, Daisy, you're coming to me," but he said like, you two smart
Yeah.
home.
It's a power move.
Yeah, exactly. How is it a power move, Shelby?
I don't know, it's just like,
You'll
Gatsby, why don't you take her?
Yeah, exactly. Because he knows he's wrong. He doesn't have to say, "You stay with me, Daisy." He's like, "Yeah, go ahead." Because he knows he's got Daisy. So he doesn't, and it's really, the confidence is so just arrogant from Tom. Yeah, just go ahead, ride with him. Because Daisy is lost to Gatsby here. And then say, made her choice again. Okay? Yes, Olivia Grace?
I have a question.
Sure.
It's not completely related to this specific part,
Right.
but it's about the hot and cold.
Yes.
Do you think the cold and the cool, because
You always look
I
so
see
cool.
like hot versus dark and cool and all the crazy adjectives that have been, or adverbs that have been in front of the word hot, like
Mhm.
explosive and
Yeah.
smoldering.
Mhm.
But what do you think the dark and cool represent? Because
I would have to look at a specific part where we see that.
I've just been looking at it, I thought that they represented kind of like status, I guess,
Mhm.
because they went to the Plaza Hotel and they're like, let's just take a bunch of cool baths and have ice.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they walked into Daisy and Tom's house, it said, Nick said that it was dark and cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then Daisy told Gatsby, you always look so cool.
Mm-hmm. To me, those feel like pockets of relief from the tension. And so the fact that Daisy finds that coolness in Gatsby feels like she sees him as like a refuge from this heat, this tension. And that, y'all caught that when she says you always look so cool, the meaningful glance, and we're not on that page. She had told him that she loved him without actually saying anything. Haven't we all been there in those really awkward moments when you're with a couple and they share those like glances and you're like, please, could you just? Yeah, that's exactly what that moment feels like for me. All right, while we're here on 135, what did you find weird on 135?
That he didn't remember it was his birthday.
Yeah, and doesn't that feel so random for Fitzgerald to throw that in there? Oh, by the way, it's my birthday. And when we see things like that, that feel so weirdly random, we have to think, okay, Fitzgerald, what are you doing? You're making some kind of point here. I'm not sure where you're going with this, but it has to be, I hope that this felt important. So
That was my
let's look at, did you put that on your this feels important?
I did it for my that's sad, cause like
Yeah.
I was like,
What a
dang,
what a
dude,
birthday.
everybody's fighting. Happy birthday.
Yeah, woo-hoo, there you go. All right, and let's look at that part. I just remembered that today's my birthday. I was 30. Before me stretched the portentous, that means ominous, menacing road of a new decade. Is he happy? No, doesn't sound like he's, ooh, yay, it's my birthday, I'm 30. And let's go about halfway through that next paragraph that starts with 30, the promise. Make sure you've marked that. Anna, you good?
Sorry, yes.
30, the promise of a decade of loneliness. A thinning list of single men to know, a thinning briefcase of enthusiasm, thinning hair. So we looked at loneliness and isolation as one of their issues that we talked about in our Zoom on Friday. And we've noted that before, how these characters are essentially lonely. They're isolated because they have no real connections, and we're looking at this one connection between Daisy and Gatsby that we wanted this to be such a good thing, and now that's just falling apart, and lack of connections between all these characters, and Nick with Jordan, whom he doesn't really love, he just kisses because she's there. There was Jordan beside me. You know, it's like, okay, well, yeah, I've got her, but she's not really in love with her. Okay? All right, so let's do that's sad. So this time, let's have front row people. I want you to go talk to your compatriot in the back row. I'll deal with y'all over here in a second. And then middle row people, Helen, you talk to Corey, and Fernando, you talk to Isaac. And then Thomas, you talk to Olivia, and Haley, you talk to Shelby. So when you go and go meet your partner, remember to maintain your distance. Share with him, this is sad. Keep your distance, please.
So,
So mine came from page 117, and that little girl came in and she was like, where's my dad at? You know, it was sad.
Yeah, it's really just like
so mine was page 135, where dude was like, yo, I just remembered today was my birthday, but mine's the
Oh, it was just when he started. It was an anytime.
Spice on this part, then it's just
Just because I thought it was sad.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like everyone realizing, oh, she really needs to
Do it, dude.
and like she
Good.
got money.
Yo.
But like it's also sad because we realized that's what he got his close enough to.
All right, so let's hear some This Is Sad. Kendall's not with us today. Kelly, what page should we go to?
120.
120.
So obviously we kind of like went through this quote
Mm-hmm.
over and over again, but I just kind of did the voice is full of money,
Mm-hmm.
and I kind of thought that was sad because like I don't know, just like basing your life off of money, and that's all she really wants and represents.
Yeah.
Like I'd much rather like of course money is good, but I'd much
Yeah.
rather like represent like happiness than
Yeah. It's so shallow and superficial, isn't it?
yeah.
All right. Fernando, what page should we go to?
124. And it's when George says that he knows about
Ooh, yes. Excellent. All right, yeah. Don't you, I feel so bad for George, although, yeah, I kind of don't like him at the end, but I still feel bad for him.
I think it's a good thing.
Okay. So let's look at several things here. All right, so we see on the bottom of 123, so, hold on, let's back up just a little bit further. Let's look at 124, because all this stuff kind of ties together. You see the paragraph that starts the relentless beating heat? What did you note in that paragraph about George?
It made him sick.
Yeah, what made him sick?
Finding out that she had a life apart from him.
Excellent. Let's make sure we mark that if we didn't. You see the sentence that says he had discovered that Myrtle had some sort of life apart from him in another world, and the shock had made him physically sick. But now look at what's going on with Tom. I stared at him and then at Tom, who had made a parallel discovery less than an hour before, and it occurred to me that there was no difference between men in intelligence or race so profound as the difference between the sick and the well. Now, this is important because let's look at what Fitzgerald was doing with this. That both George and Tom have just discovered that their wives are unfaithful. George is physically sickened by this realization. Tom is angry but not sick. So think this in your head for a second. What's Fitzgerald doing with that? What's he accomplishing? Think that in your head for a sec. Okay? Talk to your partner who's beside you. What's happening with that?
Yeah, I wouldn't say Tom was there for the money, but I'd say like, damn, bro.
Myrtle was
I know she was like
Yeah.
his wife. Not the only thing that he has, but he worked for her. And like trying to make things better.
Yeah, I also think it's kind of sad because George has pretty much nothing to live for.
All right,
Except
let's
his
hear what
wife,
amazing,
because apparently
insightful
she, like,
things
about
y'all said.
Dead.
Anna, what did you want us to talk about?
Well, we were kind of confused, and I said, like, I understand how the author was trying to show how they're not so different because they're both, like, experiencing, like, those things. But also, I feel like the reason that George was sick versus Tom was just angry is because, like, that's kind of all Wilson had.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, he's, like physically sick about it. But Tom's just, like, angry because he was doing the same thing.
Oh, okay, so with the fact that it's just one-sided with George Wilson? All right, excellent. Melissa, did you want to add anything to what y'all said? All right, Bella, what did you and, wait for it. Ian, talk about.
So he said that it kind of shows like what kind of people